Hi, I'm Linda and this is Huttons Valley Permaculture. Well, we've had a good look around the roadside swale and my bottom swale. Now let's have a closer look at my top swale. Observe and interact is one of permaculture's principles, and that's exactly what I do with my food forest swales. You always need to be on the lookout for how things are going. Observe where the sun and shaded areas are during the day and year. How does that impact your plantings? What about wind protection, frost protection, moisture retention? Observing with these thoughts in mind helps you decide on a plan of attack for building the forest and maintaining it. Let's start at the apricot guild end of the swale. I've got not only the large trees here, but in this end I have planted some smaller plants as well. I've got various raspberries planted and herbs. This one is herb Robert, and I've got some lemon balm in here because I know that's great at taking off. I do have some daffodils in here which were probably planted a little bit prematurely because they're hard to maintain. But the other day this was just tall grasses. I've cut it down, and with the biomass from the grasses I've used that to mulch around my smaller plantings in the area. Earlier in the year, I did cut trees like this Tagasasti and chop and dropped it around my productive trees. So they've got plenty of mulch around those. But at this time of year, when the grasses are growing really quickly, I like to cut those and just look after my smaller plantings. Included in my smaller plantings are quite a few bushes of rosemary. And I do have some comfrey started in this area. Just here I have a passion fruit vine which I've been trying to grow up this casuarina tree, but it's struggling to get going, and this area does get fairly shady as well. So by observing it for a while, I think this plant would benefit from being dug up and moved somewhere else. One thing you will notice as we move through the food forest is how poor my pruning skills are. I pruned these earlier in the year, and since then I have done a pruning workshop. So hopefully next time I come out and give these a bit of a chop, they'll be looking a lot better. And I might also get some fruit. With these apricot trees, I haven't had any blossoms this year, so with no blossoms, there's no fruit. Also in my apricot tree guild, I started some mint growing just because I wanted that to compete with the grasses. So far the grasses are winning, but it is surviving, so I hope down the track that will start to take off. Just here I've got a patch of Jerusalem artichokes which I've planted in various spots around the property. It is a great tuber to eat, but I also just love the beautiful flower that it puts on in late autumn. Just here I've got some blackcurrant plants. There's, well, 4, although one recently died. We had a really dry summer and I didn't get out to water these. I just thought I'd see how everything went, and I just lost one of my plants. I will be replacing it, but it just reminds you that you need to keep adding plenty of mulch for that moisture retention. I'm hoping that as my soil improves, the water holding capacity will increase. So episodes like this, where the plant's dried because it's dried out, will start to reduce. Also just over the back here are some rhubarb plants. It did have a big flower head on it the other day, so I've been in and given it a bit of a chop and removed some of the old leaves as well. I think I've still got a few to move on, but I'm pretty pleased with how these plants are going. We've arrived now in my peach tree guild. This peach tree was very productive last year. I did have a video on harvesting all the peaches, which were delicious. It has got a bit of a case of curly leaf, so I've removed a lot of those leaves and I've got some nice growth coming through now. It certainly doesn't have the peaches on it that it had last year. It does have a few, so I'm still hoping to be able to eat some of these gorgeous fruits. I've only just started with cutting grasses and mulching some of the smaller plants. But when I've got a heap of these grasses and some bare patches on the swale itself, I use it to help cover that over and build the soil in the swale. Now the rest of the swale, you'll notice the grasses have yet to be harvested. I like to call it harvesting because it doesn't seem like such a chore. Harvesting is more joyful than just mowing down grasses. I've got a little bit of work to do to move some of these weeds away from plants like this little gooseberry, but it won't take much. Most of the plant is mulched with the woodier mulch, so this will just chop down fairly readily. This plant is the first of my gooseberries to actually get some fruit coming on it. I've got another one to uncover here, and there's a third hiding in just over there. Moving from those gooseberries, I do have some more hiding in over here. Now, they don't get as much light as those plants on the other side, but you can see there's plenty of growth coming on this, and I will just have to have a look and make sure that the surrounding vegetation isn't blocking too much light so that we can get some flowers coming next season. Just here is another of my peach trees. It's a very sad looking peach. It does have some peaches coming on it, but most of its leaves are affected with this curly leaf issue. I didn't do anything about it before the leaves started to come out, so it's looking pretty gnarly, and I don't know if I've got much hope for this tree. I might be researching some trees that are a little bit more resistant, because I don't want to have to be worried about treating a tree every year. Just here is the third peach tree, which is also affected with this, I think it's a fungal disease. And I don't know how well those peaches will hang on, but it just does have some fresh new growth coming on, so it might still get enough energy to make some lovely juicy fruits. This is a wormwood, which is great growing near your chickens, but I've just put it here because it does grow big and takes over areas. So that's what I'm hoping to do, is outcompete some of these grasses and shade them out a little bit. So that's why this one's included up here in my peach tree guild. And I've just thrown in some oregano because that likes to spread out a bit too. Just here is my nectarine tree, which, like the peaches, is suffering from that fungal disease. I'll have to do some research on it. It seems to just affect the leaves as they're coming out, but these leaves that are coming a bit later don't seem to be as affected with it. I'll have to come through. This one I might just remove all those leaves and get rid of them completely, but it looks like there's only 1 or 2 nectarines for me this season, if I'm lucky. Moving along a little bit, I have red currants. Now these plants are just so easy to propagate, and that's the reason why I've got so many around my swales, but I think they're rather beautiful. Just next to the red currants, I've also got some mint growing, some calendula, and that's some lemon balm over the back there. All of those plants love to spread out, so I'm hoping they'll do just that in this area. My robinia is just starting to flower. Looks like it's being enjoyed by somebody there. Just past my robinia, on the other side of the berm, I've got my very small fig tree that's just coming to life. It is quite surrounded by weeds and some grasses, but it's actually helping to protect this tree. It's certainly doing no harm with these beautiful new shoots. It is well mulched, and around the base it's quite clear. So this tree should really get a good start this season. Just here I planted some artichokes, which are going pretty good, but they could do with some mulching. Just along from the artichokes, I've got a couple of elderberries that I just want to bulk out and fill in a lot more of this space. Just moving along the swale, I've got the first of my 4 olive trees. Just there, it's a little bit hard to spot, is a small olive tree. Although this tree looks like it's swamped by weeds, it's actually pretty clear of weeds. These just don't grow up, and they're pretty big, but it's not really impacting the tree. You can see that the base down there, it's looking pretty good. Now this one is a Kalamata olive. As you can see, there's still lots of grassy areas that would benefit from a lot more planting, but that's on my list of things to do. I do have some more plants that I can get into the ground. I've just got to get them there. Moving along, we have the first of my hazelnut trees. Now, I'm not sure what variety this one is. I didn't get any nuts off it last year, but hopeful for this year. But the tree that we were successful with last season was this tree here, where I wasn't expecting any nuts because it's still just on 3 years in the ground, but it gave me some nuts, so that was pretty exciting. Now, on each occasion that I do walk through my swales, I usually try and observe what's going on. Right here we have a Tagesasti that's fairly close, which I have chopped quite severely to give this tree a bit more space. But I'll have to keep an eye on these surrounding trees. This one here in particular might need a bit more chopping back, just so that this plant can grow freely. So I might come round and just trim that one a little bit. This one here could probably do with a little bit of trimming too. Just backtracking a little bit to this olive tree, I forgot that I've got another olive just through here. It's actually getting a few little flowers coming on it for the first time. What I will have to watch down the track is this tree here, and I'll have to keep that pruned so that this gets plenty of the afternoon sun. Now, jumping back to where we were, where that hazelnut was, we've got the third of our 4 olive trees that are on this swale, and we're getting quite a few flowers on this tree now. So it's looking like we might actually be able to harvest some olives this year. Moving from that olive tree towards the east, we've got the 4th olive tree that's on this swale, and the one that's actually looking the most healthy. And once again, it's got some flowers coming on it, though not as many as the other trees, even though these leaves are looking really young and fresh, and it's growing well. Now, something that I need to be mindful of with my olive trees, this one gets some early morning sun, but it doesn't get the afternoon sun, whereas the other one, which is just beyond this tree, gets all the afternoon sun. So that might be why that's got lots of flowers coming on it, and this doesn't have the flowers, although it's got the growth. So something that I will have to look at doing is trimming this tree back a little bit. But also, this tree behind me here, it's blocking all of the afternoon sun. So I really need to take out quite a few of these branches just to make sure that sun hits this tree during summer. Being an acacia, they don't really cop as well, so I'll have to be careful when removing branches. I think I might just move all those side branches and leave it growing towards the top there. And that should let in sufficient light to benefit my olive tree. Just in this section of my food forest, I've got my first elderberry that I planted, that it's growing really well, and it's the mother plant for all the other elderberries that I've got planted around here. It's just starting to come out in flowers, and I'm hoping this year that this plant is old enough to give me plenty of berries. Now, just here is the first of my 2 pear trees. I did a lot of mulching with this tree during winter. I have got a video out on it. This tree gets really affected with something called cherry slug, which is the larva of a sawfly, and it eats away all the leaves. So I've tried something that I learnt on the internet, and I'll leave a link for that video if you're interested in seeing it. But this tree is the healthiest it's ever been. It's got lots of lovely fresh leaves, and at this stage there's no sign of any of the larvae, although they might still be coming down the track. So I'm going to be keeping an eye on it. If I do see any of the little larvae on the leaves, I'll just be throwing some ash on, which dries the larva up and kills it. But at the moment it's looking really good, and it's actually getting some growth on it this year. This is the second pear tree. While not looking as healthy as that first one, pleased to see that it does have the new growth coming on it, and the leaves are not affected with any little bugs at this stage. Just heading down over the other side of the berm now, I've got one of our native finger lime trees, which has got plenty of flowers on it. I've recently cut these trees really severely, and I think the extra sun is really helping this little plant now. Heading up the swale from my finger lime, we're getting to the almond trees. The almonds are getting a bit of size on them now. They were planted in July 2019, so sort of three and a half years ago. And while they've got lots of growth on them, they didn't really flower this year, and certainly haven't got any nuts forming. This one is slightly down the berm from the other two and is a little bit smaller because I don't think it gets quite the moisture that the other two get, even though they kind of miss out a little bit too. I've just spotted a beautiful dragonfly up there. And like the other trees, no flowers and no nuts. But my neighbour did report the same with her almond tree as well. Something I have observed in relation to my almond trees is that they do dry out quite a bit in summer. Now the swale is not exactly on contour. This section here seems to be a bit higher than other sections which are currently underwater, and this section is quite dry. So down the track I really need to perhaps dig this out a little bit so it does collect the water more evenly along the swale, and then that might hydrate these trees a little bit better. But for this year I've done lots of organic matter around these trees. It's the Tagasasti and lots of manure, which should hopefully hold the moisture a lot better during a hot, dry summer. There's my little Tagasasti that I made a video about pruning. It's just starting to get its growth happening again, so that should have plenty of growth on it before the hot summer sun's impact. This section of the swale would certainly benefit from a lot more planting, especially through there. I need to really thickly plant that out. In this section here, I made a video when I planted my white mulberry tree. I did put some support around it. Those plants are still very small, but soon they'll be up and giving that the support it needs. We're still just warming up around here. So the white mulberry is just getting some growth on it and just starting to form some beautiful berries. Now, something that's really important to do is to be observant of snakes around here. I was going to check out my white mulberry tree the other day and was about to take a step in here, and I saw a red belly black snake out sunning itself. So you really have to be observant. I try to make a bit of noise and thump around when I'm out in my swales, especially on the warmer days, just so that they know I'm coming and can get out of the way. Now, just hiding over the back here, I've got one of my orange trees that produced its first orange this season. This orange tree has been protected by this plant here, which protects from a lot of the easterly winds. It doesn't seem to be too affected by southerly winds, and It's got plenty of flowers coming on it and plenty of new growth. So it seems to be happy in this little microclimate. Maybe this plant behind it here also sort of traps the heat, which helps this plant as well. This is a beautiful flowering tea tree, which native pollinators really seem to enjoy. Part of observing is just to see what is enjoying the different plants in the swale. And if they're a favourite, you can plant a whole lot more. Now we're approaching my avocado section, which I've filmed quite a bit lately, but I haven't shown you this little plant. This was one that one of my sheep who got out really chewed on. It had been going really well until that sheep devoured it, but I left it in the ground, and now below the graft we've got this tree coming up. I am going to leave this. If this tree is successful, I might try and graft a good variety onto this rootstock, since these roots are already in the ground. So it's survived winter, and hopefully it'll really get some growth happening in summer, and maybe I'll be able to graft it one day. I have still got the other avocados in their little frost protection tents, which I may or may not leave on. I'll assess their growth and decide if I need to remove it. But I did leave some branches over the top of these trees just to make sure no late frosts got them, and also protect them from the sun a little bit too. Although they do have this Hakea plant growing, which will help protect from harsh sun. And just nearby, we've got one of the robinias, a deciduous tree. So those leaves come in and protect these other plants from the hot summer sun. This plant just here is actually a volunteer in the swale. It's some sort of native, I don't know what, but it's about to come into flower, and I'll be really interested to see what insects and birds enjoy these. This is a recent planting of an elderberry that's going quite well, and some little comfrey flowers popping up also. I did a massive prune of this Tagasasti tree and harvested all of its branches to keep building the soil to help feed my avocados. I've got some more successful comfrey here and another 2 elderberries in this area. Now we'll sneak a peek at these avocados and just see how we're looking in here. It does have some new growth happening just down there, and there seems to be plenty of light in here, so I'll see how they go during summer and consider taking off the mesh if they seem to be struggling. Wow, I've just snuck into this little tent, and I've got some flowers happening on this avocado tree. Some nice new leaves happening there. So this plant seems to be very happy. Perhaps if I've got flowers coming on this tree, I should be taking off the mesh to make sure the pollinators can come in, although I can see some flies in here, so they may find a way. Now, I've recently done a bit of an experiment with pumpkin seeds and potatoes, and I'm trying to get them started up here in my swales. In the past, pumpkin seeds have always failed, and I haven't seen any sign of them this time either. And the potatoes are just starting to sprout. This one here is the one that's furthest along, and we're actually getting some leaves on it now. I do have heaps of plants coming along really well in my veggie patch, so I don't really need these, but I just love the idea of being able to get bonus food out of my swale area. We're just about at the end of the swale. But right at the end, I've got my black mulberry, which is a really slow growing plant. I don't know if that's just for me or that's just how they are, but let's go and have a look at that one. I've used lots of my Tagasasti prunings around all my productive trees. It kind of has kept the weeds down a little bit, although you can see the buttercups slowly getting through. But this tree, some years it looks okay and other years it looks like it's struggling. This year it's made a good start. The leaves look pretty good and there's just a couple of fruit coming on it. Nothing significant, so I think I had some fruit the first year and then nothing for a couple of years. So I don't know what it's all about with these plants, but it might be just a patience thing. Just beyond the mulberry tree is all my little sticks indicating where I've recently planted some support trees. I'll link the video for that. That was just a very recent video. So check that out if you want to see what I've got planted in this area. My swales were built about 3.5 years ago and I'm pretty happy with how it's all growing. I'll continue to observe and then make decisions on what needs doing to slowly move it along to a self-sustaining forest. I hope you've enjoyed today's tour of the top swale. Thanks so much for watching and bye for now.